Hi guys, it's DC the Blacksmith back with another In Re vlog, a video vlog doing a recap and review of day 3 and 4 of the January 6th committee hearings. So, I always forget to mention this, but anybody who's watching via YouTube or Twitch, this is a pre-recording. So I try to put it in the description, or I try to catch the live chat when I do upload it to stick it in there. This is a pre-recording. They won't always be pre-recordings. One day I'll go live, one day I'll be on camera, but still new, getting my setup together. You guys see my new intro. Knowing me, that intro is going to change probably 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times between now and the next upload. But I really like it, so let's hope it stays. Anyway, okay, so we're going to get into this recap and review. We're still on the January 6th House Committee public hearings. I understand that a lot of good information has come out of these committee hearings or public hearings. I still think that this was an awful lot of resources. This could have been a docu-series. And I know that one of the benefits that I've heard float about is that the DOJ is picking up information, and they might federal charges or whatever have you may come out of that. I guess the DOJ also could have requested information from the closed sessions. So I just feel like, I don't know. I don't know. I get that it's important. I don't want people to lose focus of what happened on January 6th. I understand that this is I understand the importance. I understand that it's good to educate and remind and remember, but I just feel like the production quality of these could have been also served as a docuseries. Congress is allowed to make movies and things like that. I just think it could have been a docuseries, and they could have aired it, and the DOJ could have got this same information. Now, Jamie Raskin, you guys will recognize his name. He was one of the House attorneys during the second impeachment. He did a interview I saw, and he said that the investigation is still ongoing. So they are still receiving information. And my understanding of that is that if there is additional information that warrants also a public hearing, that is something they will consider. So maybe they just wanted to front load what they had prepared. And as they get new information, maybe they'll do those as public hearings. I don't know. But anyways, let's get into day 3. I don't have the date. I know this was a Friday. I don't know, like the 18th or 19th of June. I will put the date in the description somewhere, and I will also try to timestamp between day 1 and day 4. So day 3. So we start off. Day 3 is going to be focused on the campaign to pressure Vice President Mike Pence to not certify the election or to send the electorate back. So I've kind of got a feel of how these are structured. So we open day 3. Benny Thompson, the chairman, Democrat from Mississippi, speaks. He gives his opening, and he talks about, kind of introduces slightly. I've noticed that, so for each hearing, it seems like Benny Thompson is going to give an opening statement, and his opening is meant to be what I would call the impact statement. So then Vice Chair Liz Cheney, she gives an opening statement, and it seems to me that each hearing, her opening statement is going to explain where we're coming from. So she's going to give a brief summation of the topics for the previous hearings, and then she's going to explain what the hearing of the day is about. So she talked about how day one was focused on the violence at the Capitol that day. Day two was focused on the big lie. And then today, day three is focused on the efforts to pressure Mike Pence to do something that was ridiculous. And then, she says you're going to hear various video, or she shows various video testimony from their closed sessions with people talking about this idea being floated around. And she also reiterates that Vice President Pence was correct in how he handled the situation. So the next person who speaks at these, so Benny Thompson, the chair, speaks. He gives the impact statement. Liz Cheney speaks. She sets up where we've been, prior hearings, and then where we're headed, the hearing in question. And then the next person to speak, that's the committee member who is leading. I might be using that word loosely, but that's the committee member who's leading the hearing that day. So day three was Pete Aguilar. I keep wanting to say Aguilera, like Christina Aguilera, but I'm sure I'm getting his name maybe not correct, but it's Pete Aguilar, and he's a Democrat from California. So Pete Aguilar speaks. He gives his intro. He says that, sorry, y'all, I read my handwritten notes, and sometimes my handwriting is not given what it's supposed to have gave. He shows, so he says there was efforts to pressure, Mike Pence to go into, let me go back. So what happens on electoral day, January 6th, I don't know if it's always January 6th or if this day just fell on January 6th. The vice president, in the Constitution, the vice president presides over joint sessions of Congress. So on electoral certification day, it's a joint session, and the vice president governs the proceedings. When I say govern the proceedings, it's a Robert Rules of Order. He runs the who can speak. Now it's time for this. Do I hear a second? Hearing none, that type of stuff. Great. So all through history, 200 some odd years, nearly 300 years now, the VP goes in there and basically says, okay, the election is certified. He doesn't do anything other than lead the meeting, and then at the end, the election has been certified. That's all he does. What President Trump and some people who are unhinged, allegedly, maybe, I don't know, but they wanted him to not certify the election. They wanted him to basically say, I can't certify these electorates, send them back. We know he didn't do that, and is mentioned and will be mentioned that, he put out a tweet saying that his faith and his legal counsel has advised him that is not the vice president's role. The vice president's role is to certify the election. So Pete Aguilar, we're still on his opening, his little intro. He shows, to me, it was very graphic footage of the rioters, insurrectioners, whatever you want to call them, when they received the message that Pence wasn't going to do what Donald Trump wanted him to do. And they're like, Pence caved, and MF this and MF that, and we're going to drag them all through the streets. This is what the rioters are saying. You hear the chants where they're saying, hang Mike Pence. And then they showed where they had erected a gallows. I mean, they were really ridiculous in this. absolute foolishness. And this is going to be a long video because I might go off tangent. But the people that were up there doing all of this, I'm sorry, that is un-American to me. No, I'm not sorry. It's un-American to me. This idea that people who have different political ideologies is un-American, that's foolish. Having different political ideologies and having different ideas of how you think we can get to a more perfect union or ways that we can get to a perfect union, that's the epitome of being an American. I don't have to agree with how everybody thinks that we should get to a more perfect union. I like more of a federalism take. I like a limited, very limited roles of the federal government, strengthening more state and local. There are other Americans who may want the idea of more federal government overreach and more federalized policies and things like that. Neither one of us is any less American than the other. That's called debate. That's how we get to better ideas. We disagree and we're forced to work together so we can move forward in a compromise. And which idea of America can we both fit in? That is the epitome of what the American experiment was. That's what makes us, as I like to say, the country on the hill. But the idea that because you don't like something, we're going to go break windows and act a fool at the Capitol and carry around an enemy combatant's flag. Yes, the Confederate flag is the flag of part of the country that lost the war to the Union, which we live under. It's an enemy combatant's flag. The idea that we're going to do all of that behind one man because he lost the election, that to me is un-American. Priorities. So Pete Aguilar, he introduces the panel, and the panel is Lutic. He's a conservative legal theory. They said he was the main one providing Pence with legal advice during the, no. He wasn't the main one, but he had provided Pence with some legal advice about his role. Ludwig is an old conservative. And by old, I actually am meaning age. And the reason I draw attention to his age is because he's been around the conservative, the Republican side. This is not like this is somebody who doesn't live in this. This is a conservative who's been around a long time. It's probably what you would call a traditional conservative. I'm just willing to bet. And Greg Jacob, he was counsel to Mike Pence. He was with Mike Pence that day. He was the main one giving Mike Pence counsel and legal advice about what his role was as VP. So Benny recognizes himself for a few questions, and he says that he asked Jacobs a question, and I forget what the question is. I need to get better about writing down the exact question, but these if I write down all that stuff, it gets a little long. I handwrite stuff, I don't type. He basically says that his understanding is the role of the VP. Oh, I remember the question now. He asked him, what is the role of the VP? What is your legal understanding of the role of the VP? I call it electoral count day, whatever, certification day, whatever it's officially called. And he says that he thinks that the role of the in the Constitution, it says that the vice president presides over joint sessions, and the Electoral Count Act further says that he certifies the election. And he said that he told Pence, and he thinks personally that there's no way that the framers meant in any way to put the final vote decision in the hands of one man. It's not the vice president. Our framers departed from the throne. The revolution was about, we didn't want to be under a king's rule. So he said there's no way that the framers in knowing that we just broke away from the crown, so to speak, would have wanted to go back to a system that put the transference of power, authority in the hands of one person. So, he talks about originalism and, well, no, I talked about this. So, right. So that's his understanding. And if you are such an originalist, if you are such a strict constructionalist, you would have that same understanding too. So for everybody who was questioning Ketanji Brown Jackson about how they were such staunch originalists and staunch, strict constructionalists and these things, where were y'all when all of this was going on? And I know that there were people that day. So background about January 6th. I think I wrote about this on a blog post. I never wrote, it's one of those, where were you when? I was watching the I'm going to depart and I'm going to hopefully get to where I can timestamp this in the video. So where was I on January 6th? I was work from home and I was watching the news, all of them, because there was supposed to be a speech that day. These are always covered. These are always videotaped, but they don't get much fanfare. But there was a lot going on. In particular, President Trump was giving a speech that day, so it was going to get covered. I was watching that speech, and then they didn't break away from coverage as and I'll word this. So from the point that there was a speech, the then protesters who hadn't reached the Capitol at that point to do anything untoward, at this point, I would say just walking, they are still protesters. We got to see the lead up of that. The cameras kept rolling, yada, yada, yada. There were people, I don't remember exactly, I'm sure there was people at this point who came on and said, oh, Mike Pence can't do that. No, he's just going to certify, yada, yada, yada. And that's fine. But where are y'all on the days leading up to this, letting Crazy Town, in my opinion, know that this was a problem? And at this point, yeah, this is going to be a long video because I'm going to pontificate a lot. At this point, and what we know about January 6th, some of my frustration and anger is not at the former president. At this point, I'm starting to have a problem with weak-minded people. I'm starting to have a problem with groupthink. I'm starting to have a problem with these well past grown men. And I say men because the majority of the politicians around Trump and in office are men, these grown people, not standing up and saying enough is enough to him in his face. They said Rudy Giuliani was running the place, and these other illegal minds knew that he was bonkers. These theories were bonkers, I should say. They knew that he was out of his mind with these theories. And it seemed like nobody was forceful enough to make it stop. Now, they say, oh, if you go along to get along, you'll get further in life. And, if you don't make a ruckus and you don't always complain, they say that works for some people. That doesn't work for me. And it wouldn't have worked for me concerning our democracy. That would not have worked for me. Nobody in that, I might have told Rudy Giuliani to shut up or square up with his joints. What you gonna do? I'm not a violent person. I promise I'm not. But there's some situations where, do you stand for anything? Do you actually have a belief system? And all of these Republicans, there was a time where the party existed before Trump. Someone who is, I'm not, a young person, I'm not old. I think I've been a Republican longer than he has. There's a lot of people in the party who have been Republicans longer than he has. There's a time where the Republican Party existed before Trump, before ignorant stuff like, we're not going to have a party platform. Our platform going to be, we just believe what he believes. What? Who? What? Not the Christian party. Not, we're not supposed to have idols. Not that party. But that being said, these people, they have a belief system before him. And, oh, well, we did say something on the interview, but did you say it to his face? There's no way this should have been allowed to go on. And I know people like to criticize the senators for contesting the electorates. We'll get into that. I think I wrote a note as I'll go, as I need to get back on topic before this video gets even longer than it's supposed to be. That's a criticism, but that's also a part of that debate process. What is not a part of that debate process is working people up, telling people something that isn't what it's going to be, and in the face of the violence that went on January 6th, being not as forceful in condemning it as you should be. That's what's not a part of the process. Getting back to day 3 after I went on my tangent. So Liz Cheney speaks to Lutic. Lutic is the older conservative. And like I said, I just think that his age is significant to a few things. One, as he gives his testimony, Ludwig is retired. He's a retired federal judge, if I'm not mistaken, I think. And he is still an active legal mind. So Ludwig, for a public hearing that's supposed to captivate people, unfortunately, he's ineffective in that setting because he is older, like we will all get. And he speaks slow, like I'm sure I will as I get old, long in the tooth, or what have you. For a public hearing that's trying to capture short attention spans, it's not very effective. But I didn't, and I want to mention here, when you hear older people speak, and they're going slow and yada, 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 that doesn't necessarily mean that the inner workings of their brain has slowed down, because Ludick is still a very active legal mind. A lot of the testimony he gives is from things that he's written, because that's what he does now as he's retired. So I just wish that there was a different way that they had been able to present his testimony, because what he was saying, if you pay attention, was spot on. His writings are spot on. I will get there one day. One day I won't be able to come here and do all this yep, 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 like that. The only thing I will be able to do is write on my blog. God willing, it's a long time, but age comes for us all. But I wish there was a better way to present his testimony. But it was impactful that he was there in person, being who he is. So then the one person from the committee's counsel, he asked some questions. They have so many different things going on. So again, it's not a regular committee where you have the committee members asking the questions. You have one committee member is kind of guiding, and then you also have like a lawyer counsel who also is presenting some information and asking some questions. So they asked Jacobs a few questions, and he says that while they were discussing this, he said one of the issues is there has been a history of objections in the debate of electorates. So early on, when they were discussing this idea that Mike Pence could do anything other than what he did, the question was, what happens? Who's the deciding factor if the debate, when there's a debate and objection to the electorates, who makes the final decision? Which is not necessarily a ridiculous question. If you think about the joint session, and if you think about the idea that the debate is allowed, then if debate is allowed, people might move from one conclusion to another in debate. So if there is a question that is not sorted out to finality in a debate, at some point there is a decision maker. So in the House and the Senate, we vote on things. However, there can be tie votes. So in big theory, in big universe theory, who gets the ultimate decision in this? Now, I went on and did my own legal conclusion to this. I am a licensed attorney. This question to me has been answered before in recent history. To me, if there is a question about the election for whatever reason, the Supreme Court eventually, in one way or another, becomes the ultimate decision maker, or they become the person that makes the decision. Why do I say that? If you have issues with the election, then you have an issue with a state, because our elections are state by state, and then the states send their electorates. So if there is an issue about the election, you had to have had an issue with a state process, which happened in Bush v. Gore, where Al Gore thought that there was a question, Al Gore and Bush, who actually won the Florida electorates. That question, or those questions, are hammered out in court, and it gets to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court makes that decision. The Supreme Court decides, no, this is, in that case, Bush v. Gore, Florida went to Bush, and so those electorates go to Bush. So this has been answered. This is what we do. You were supposed to go to court, which the Trump administration did. They lost each time. They lost every time they went. So it's over. If you have an issue with electorates, that means you have an issue with an election. If you have an issue with elections, you need to take that up in the state courts. You lost. Now we're here. Now the electorates have been determined to be correct. So there's another step to that, which I think that the questions that were coming up, we're getting into. What happens if you think that there's been some tampering with the electorates, which, come to find out, the tampering wasn't coming from Democrats. Come to find out, the tampering was coming from Trump and them pressuring people to have an alternate state of electorates. I also think that is an issue. That's something to do with the state. And why I say that, because after the state runs their election, the state goes through a process by, which they have their electorates on, nice, beautiful paper, and all these people have to sign it and stamp or tape or put a sticker seal on it and that type of stuff. I feel as though with all the processes that has to go through, by the time the actual state electorate papers make it there, we've answered all of these questions. So the debates then are not, nobody's overturning anything that the states sent at that point. I just feel like all of these questions are questions that go to court before we get to electorate certification day. So if your question is, yeah, but if the courts don't finish quick enough, impassable or impossible. Because like with Bush v. Gore, they couldn't have electoral counting day without waiting on what Florida's electorates were supposed to do. So they had to wait for the court to finish. I just feel like I get the question, and I'm not going to say that the question was completely out of bounds. I just feel like in many ways we've answered this, we've answered how this worked. And typically we don't have people acting a fool. We've done this for years and years now. This is the first time we've had chaos and confusion and strife. It's ridiculous. I really just think it's ridiculous. So they show more video testimony from other White House officials, attorneys, Trump advisors, who also said that they were repeatedly repeatedly told that, hey, this is ridiculous. It's over. Let it go. And then they show again, Jared, that there was a lot of concern about the White House counsel resigning over these types of issues, and Jared Kushner saying he thought it was just whining. So then they talk about, so then they ask Lutic questions again. And he says that, and he explains very methodically, the root or the blueprint of overturning the 2020 election, he says, started with the idea that there was some historic evidence that Vice President Jefferson's or Adams and Nixon would have had some type of authority or had considered something, overturning the election based on there's some historical evidence. And by the way, Lutic kept saying there's some historical evidence. He didn't give what the evidence was, in which, in my mind, there is no historical background to that. We're talking about then VP Jefferson, then VP Adams, then VP Nixon. And we want to say about Nixon, I don't think any of them even considered the idea that, I'm just gonna change the outcome. I don't think it happened. I don't. And I don't think Lutic thought that it would have happened either. But he says that the centerpiece of the blueprint to overturning the election, and Lutic didn't say this, I'm going to say it. I think this became the centerpiece. I think once we couldn't intimidate the counting, and once we started losing court battles, I think that this VP mess became the centerpiece. So he says the centerpiece became this historical precedent that was referenced. And Lutic describes this as constitutional mischief. And I agree that there couldn't have been a better term for this. As attorneys, and I said this during my review and recap of the Ketanji Brown Jackson hearings. Shout out to myself. As attorneys, you advocate for your client. And obviously that means that you read things that can be interpreted in the light that best help your client's situation. However, there are some things that are just plain as day. There are some things that are considered well settled. There are some things that generally don't make sense. And while you can zealously advocate for your client, what you cannot do is come up with something that you can't logically proof out. You can't logically walk back your conclusion step by step and say, okay, I can say this because, this matches this logically. And if this matches this logically, this can match this logically. And, you climb the ladder until you say, see, this conclusion fits my client. What you cannot do as an attorney is say, I'm just going to say this conclusion fits my client. Oh, I didn't really do any logical, proof, any logical climbing for this, but I think it fits. That's what you cannot do. One moment. So, a constitutional mischief is a great way to put it. So then they go on to talk to Jacobs. And at this time, Jacobs, he was step by step with Mike Pence the whole time. It comes out later in this day 3 hearing that Jacobs was with Mike Pence when he had to be whisked away because he had to be hidden from the anti-Americans who were out there trying to mean him harm for whatever reason. So Jacob says that in conversations with Eastman, he asked them, he said, so if this is your theory, John Eastman or Jay Eastman or whoever, Dr. Eastman, I'm not exactly sure. From what I get, he was somebody who, I don't know, whatever. Anyways, So Eastman was advising the president. He was the one pushing the idea that Mike Pence could do constitutional mischief. So he said that in his conversations with Eastman leading up to electoral certification day, he was asking him, so if what you're saying is true, do you think that other vice presidents could do this? So could Gore have not certified the election, then VP Gore, or could Kamala Harris just do what she wants to do? And he says that Eastman said, no, they couldn't do it, but Pence should. What? And I wrote down, that sounds on brand. That sounds on brand for where we've come as a Republican Party. I don't understand this. And I come back to, I have an issue with groupthink. I have an issue with cowards. I understand that not everybody's going to be brave. I understand that not everybody's going to be that type of person that speaks up. But if you're an elected official, by definition, you're supposed to be speaking up for people. So I expect you, that's what I expect you to do. I do expect you to be brave. I expect you to have went in and said, this is foolishness. This is ridiculous. We're not doing this. I don't care what money you give to the party. I don't care what connections you have. I don't care what dirt on you have on me. I don't care about any of that. We're not doing this. Let it go. Enough is enough. And then behave in such a manner that lets people know in group that we are not doing this. And if you continue to do this, I will not be able to continue to be by your side. That's how you handle stuff like that. Because if he didn't have people who were standing behind him, this wouldn't have happened. If he didn't have people who didn't speak up, this wouldn't have happened. If he didn't have a network that was committed to letting him air this stuff out when they knew it was wrong, they knew it was wrong, and he knew it was wrong too, this wouldn't have happened. I think that what happened on January 6th is our generation's version of like the cult stuff that used to happen with cults unaliving themselves and things like that in group, that type of group think that you look at it and go, how did you guys get here? Where did society go wrong here? That to me is that's what January 6th is. That was drinking Kool-Aid. Constitutional mischief flavored Kool-Aid, if you ask me. I think I'm going to put in the description of this constitutional mischief Kool-Aid. Ridiculous. So we get into the tweets on that day. So Trump retweeted a memo and he tagged, I don't know how Twitter works very well. I have a Twitter, but I don't know how it works. He tagged Pence in it that basically said that Pence can do whatever he needed to do on January 6th. And apparently, if you put somebody, is this the right one? I think, am I reading the right note? Yeah, I think I am. No. I'm ahead of myself. Strike back, reverse it. Okay. I'm ahead of myself. So there was a meeting with the vice president, Jacobs, who's here at this panel, and we'll get to the tweets. It's not far behind. Jacobs, who's here at this panel, Eastman, and I think Jacob says that Meadows showed up at some point, and they were trying to talk about basically pressuring and pushing Mike Pence into doing what is called like the Pence card, I guess. The idea that he was going to single-handedly decide what everybody's vote was supposed to be. Jacob says that Vice President Pence never wavered. They asked him, did he ever waver in his denial that he could do this? And he said, no, he never wavered. So Eastman was saying stuff like, well, the courts won't get involved because this is a political question. And so it won't even make it to the courts. And Eastman did eventually tell Jacobs, and Jacobs says that he has like, he remembered very vividly asking him, so you think that if this did get to the courts, if it did, we'd win? And he said Eastman thought they would lose. So if Eastman was giving legal advice at this point, a good sign that something's not based in logic is that your attorney doesn't even believe there's a chance at winning. Now, there could be a small chance at winning. There could be a legal argument where someone has like a very minuscule chance of winning, but just to admit that you don't have any chance at all, none, but you're going to keep saying it, no, that's what you cannot do as an attorney. So there was an event, I want to say January 5th in Georgia. This was a Trump rally, and the rally was supposed to be for the Georgia runoff for the Senate races. Georgia has a 50% rule. If the candidate doesn't get up to 50%, then it goes into a runoff election, I think, until someone gets above 50%. So I think those senators were Kelly Loeffler and Raphael Warnock, I remember, and I can't think of him, Senator Ossoff, and I can't think of the other Republican. That was that election. So Trump is at a rally. It is a Trump rally, but it's supposed to be in support of these runoff, senators. And instead, he talked about Mike Pence, talking about he needs to prove himself and he can do this, and it's all up to him now, and all of that foolishness at his rally. Those rallies were big. He had a big crowd at the rally. Now, two things were wrong with this to me. At this point, had I been one of those Republican senators, I would have been pissed. You lost your election. And I would have told him that too. Don't you get up here talking about that. I would have told them to cut his mic. Oh, you lost your election. This ain't about you. This is about me. I don't care if it is a Trump rally. This is about the Republicans coming up. We might have a chance if you go sit down from this nonsense. So that was January 5th or 4th. And at the time, so much had happened. I didn't realize how close together some of this stuff was during the lead up to January 6th. So they said there was still, Jacob says that Eastman, up until then was still requesting that the VP reject the electorates and send it back to the states and say he can't certify the election. He said this was the night before January 6th. And Jacob says he remembers because he wrote down a note. He remembers this because he took a notepad and he, wrote down a little note from the conversation. I think they showed his note at the hearing. And Jacob says, he thought himself that we're all conservatives here. We're supposed to be small government and originalists. And that's not the fact that they're pushing this idea that is very counter to who we are as conservatives. Problems, cowards. So on January 6th, Jacob says that Eastman told him that Jefferson would have supported this or some mess like that. No. And then Eastman says, well, the courts, he goes into the courts won't deal with this because it's political. It's a political question. Now, I'm not a constitutional attorney. That is not my ministry. That is a lot of brain power. But my understanding of political question is it's a question that is best resolved by the voters. Something that comes up during election, like it's something that you could easily put on the ballot, something that is a procedural matter of the vice president's authority to something. If the question before the court is, what is the vice president's authority regarding certification of elections? Something just tells me that is not a voter issue. That's not political question. That is a constitutional matter that is rightfully would be before the Supreme Court. But whatever. But again, when you pushing stuff that has no logical basis, that's what happens. So we're on January 6th now. And they said that there was is this January 6th? No. This is still before January 6th. Before January 6th, Jacobs talks about a phone call between Donald Trump and Mike Pence. And some other people kind of testified about a phone call. And one of the words that somebody could make out was, well, I don't want to be your friend anymore if you don't do this. Y'all, at this point, one, on brand. On brand. Trump said that. That's on brand. I believe he said that. I can hear him saying some mess like that. It's ridiculous. And the fact that people have let him, behavior like that starts at home. That starts at home. That's an issue with home training. And the fact that people have let him behave like this, because that's why he felt comfortable saying something like that at his big age as an outgoing president. The reason he felt so comfortable letting something like that fly out of his mouth is because he's been allowed to behave like this. And my issue is starting not to be him. My issue is starting to be the other people around him who do not have, that we as the public know, they didn't have a history of behaving like this. And they know that this behavior was wrong. And they know that this was out of bounds. And still, nobody stood up to him. And I can only wonder why. And I just have a problem with the party as a whole. If the issue is that you liked a lot of the Donald Trump policies, it's a policy. Policies don't belong to one person. Get him out of the way. If the issue is that you like him as a person after all of this, after I don't want to be your friend anymore, after that, really? Okay. Or is your issue funding? Because I'm starting to think it's, well, he brings a lot of money. I don't know. But what I do know is that it's just a problem to me about cowardness. I think just as a society as a whole, we need to normalize being an adult. We need to normalize people being an adult and behaving in generally a progressively maturing manner as you age. And it is okay to be an adult. And if you stand up for something you believe in, that is fine. We've got to normalize a little bit of courage in society. Because this whole January 6th and the lead up, it's one thing we get to January 6th and we can put a lot of that on an instant thing, but a lot of this lead up, this is lacking courage. This is groupthink. This is constitutional mischief flavored Kool-Aid. It's probably purple. Constitutional mischief flavored Kool-Aid is probably purple. It's really ridiculous. So they take a 10-minute recess. They come back and we're still on January 5th. So in the middle of the night, here's the tweet. In the middle of the night, Donald Trump tweeted and he added Mike Pence. And when you add somebody, all the comments, you get a alert, I guess, every time somebody comments. And so he tweeted basically, he tweeted something where everybody was under the comments saying, yeah, we support you. Yeah. And Mike Pence got to see all of that. And they didn't go into that too much, but I guess the implication was that was applying public pressure on Mike Pence. So we get to January 6th, and they say that Vice President Pence started the day in prayer. And I wrote down, in contrast to that hellion that was over there raising all Cain and Abel. So he started the day in prayer, and we'll hear later that he ended the day in prayer. So Jacob says that, he showed up and he went to the vice president's residence that day, and there was another phone call, and Donald Trump called the vice president, and the vice president stepped out to take the phone call, and no staff went with him. And so I don't think he said he didn't know what was said from there, and he couldn't hear anything. And then they cut to a video of some Trump staff members and family who they weren't, I don't think they said that they were in the room when Trump made the call, but apparently Donald Trump got loud, and he got loud enough to where people could make out some things. And one of the staffers said he couldn't make out everything, but he heard Trump say the word wimp, probably in reference to Pence. And I think they spoke to Ivanka, and she said she had never heard him take a tone like that with Vice President Pence. So, it's just ridiculous. So then they cut to video again, and they say at 2:13 p.m., rioters breached the Capitol. And I don't know, can I get real? But they said rioters breached the Capitol. In my mind, had I looked out and seen people, at this point, people breaching the Capitol with the enemy combatants flag, which is what I call the Confederate flag, enemy combatants flag, in my mind, that's an act of war at that point. I don't care if they are American citizens. At that point, they took actions counter to the Confederates were American citizens too. They were United States citizens too until they weren't, until they decided to, act a war. It happens in other countries. Hey, we can get into a video vlog about that later, but that's what I say anyway. So on 2:13 p.m., the rioters breached the Capitol. And they said Mark Meadows was notified of the violence. And he told the president before, I think things got ramped up. At 2:14 p.m. on January 6th, so 2:13 p.m., January 6th is when they breached the Capitol. 2:24 p.m., January 6th, President Trump tweeted that Vice President Pence didn't have the courage, to do what needed to be done. So then they show videos of the rioters calling Vice President Pence a traitor. And at this point, my problem was, the implication is that he was a traitor to President Trump. So he was a traitor to one person. Had they been talking about that he was a traitor to the nation, we could have had a completely different conversation. But I just happen to know that they were saying he was a traitor to Trump. I think somebody even said he was a traitor to Trump. So the Christian party, the party that professes to be the party of faith, the party of the Christian faith, we're not supposed to have idols, but whatever. Anyways, so Mark Meadows refuses to testify. They had a few Mark Meadows aides who testified. And then they show more video footage, and apparently people were telling Mark Meadows, you need to tell Trump to put out a tweet or something, you need to tell him he needs to end this. And they were saying that I guess he was running back and forth, like he would go talk to Trump and tell him something and to come back. And the whole time people are telling Mark Meadows, you need to, was he chief of staff at this time? I don't know. But they were telling him, you need to go get some discipline over there. Again, I have a little bit of a problem to where at this point, Donald Trump is one person. And the way these hearings are set up, it sounds like it was 5 people, 8 people, 10 people with a problem. And y'all are telling Mark Meadows, who is also one person, to go talk to him. Had it just me, and had it been me and 10 other me's, we would have went in all 10 people to talk to one people. And I'll let y'all draw how that would have looked in your head. But again, it's that like group think, I'm scared to get in trouble. I'm scared to say something. At what point do you stand up to something as you see on the news? Because cameras were there already. So the news was there already. You're seeing this on the news. You're hearing reports that they're having to, all the line of succession, the speaker, the VP, the this, the that. You're hearing that they have to get all these people in secure locations. You're hearing that they're barricaded. You're hearing all this stuff. Some person was injured, the gallows. You're seeing the police are over. You're hearing all this stuff, and we're still, I don't know, I don't want to be in trouble. At what point do you stand up for something? Because I wouldn't have told Mark Meadows a thing. At that point, I would have been done talking to him. At that point, I would have been, hey, Mr. President, hey, we need to talk to you. Hey, they might have had thrown me out too. And at that point, if that's how I would have been remembered, that's how I would have been remembered. But yeah, I would have had a big old problem with that. I would have told Mark Meadows, you can get out of my way, because clearly whatever you were saying to him is not working. Whatever you're going in there and saying is not enough. So let me, school me, let me go in here and talk some real talk on him. I would have went in there and cussed him out. Now, if he wanted to get loud and ignorant, he could have got loud and ignorant, but it would never have been said that I was, oh, I don't know, nobody knows I'm doing. Anyways, somebody, it had been reported by a confidential informant, and I don't know if this was, no, I think they did say that this might have been prior to, but somewhere in the course of investigation, a confidential informant of the Proud Boys said that they would have killed Mike Pence had they got to him. Now, I can't remember if this was before or after investigations. I don't know. But if y'all had confidential informants with the Proud Boys, apparently you knew that there was some type of threat. So the fact that we find out that y'all had confidential informants and y'all had some type of, there better be a hearing on why there was inadequate police coverage that day, or whatever, Capitol Police coverage. So then they show video after Mike Pence got evacuated. Not video, footage. I mean, images from the National Archives of where Mike Pence was, some secure, undisclosed location. And they continue to ask Jacobs about what went on. So Jacobs says that, he was with Mike Pence, and he said the cars pulled up, and he said all of Pence's staff got in the car, and which is strange that they would have been in a position to get in the car before him, but I don't know how that was set up. And he says that when the cars got there, Mike Pence refused to get in the car. And somebody had talked about this before, but the supposedly, I don't think Mike Pence has said this himself. I don't remember, but supposedly the issue Mike Pence had was when leaders leave, the country's overtaken. And he did not want the world to see the vice president leaving the peaceful transition of power and ceding to the riders. He didn't want the riders to get that satisfaction. And so he refused to get in that car. And he said, we can go somewhere else, but he would not get in the car. And so then Jacob said he got out the car. And I said, I know that's right. That's you call roll. Because, as much bravado as I have for standing up for stuff, I might have been like, you sure you're not getting in the car? Okay, I'm going to get out too. And I would have got out too, but there would have been a brief moment of, are you sure? Are you sure? Because Pence was in a lot of a different situation than Trump was in at that point. So, Jacob says that later Eastman called and said that, okay, so later, and by later, after the riot had subsided and they were going to get back into talking or debate, or they were getting back to business, Eastman called and said that the Electoral Count Act was violated because the Arizona debate stopped, because at that point the riot, so they stopped debate, they went into recess, and the speaker's speech wasn't properly counted for time. And so he Eastman then again asked the VP that he needed to not certify. He needed to send it back to the states. And Jacob's better than me because I would have cussed Eastman clear out. Now somebody did cuss him out. I can't think of the man's name, but it was a somebody who did end up cussing him out when he called them. I would have went off, and he would have hung up on me. I would have called back. I would have left messages. I might have went to. I would have had to find him. Hey, let me holler at you. We got something we need to talk about. I would have continued to cuss him out. I would have went on TV to cuss him out. They would have had to only put me on late night. He would. He would have knew to lose my number. Don't you call me again. But somebody did cuss him out. I don't think I wrote it down. Jacobs, he goes on to say that his faith helped him a lot that day. He said that when they were in the secure location, he read the Bible. One of the passages he ran was that, Daniel 6, where he talks about that Daniel was faithfully serving a pagan nation and how he served as best as how God told him to serve. And basically he didn't do the people wrong because they were pagans. He acted how he was supposed to act, regardless of how the people around him acted. And then they're at 3:50 a.m. Someone texted Vice President Pence Bible passage. I fought the good fight. I finished the race. I kept the faith. And later on, it was found out that Eastman texted Giuliani to ask to be put on a pardon list. Why Giuliani had any power still at that point, I don't know. So then they show video footage of Eastman's deposition for the January 6th committee. And he just pled the fifth the whole time. And that was probably very smart of him. While it's frustrating with us, to be honest with you, that was probably one of the best things he could have did for himself. His sorry self. I think Liz, it was Cheney who presented this, but basically he pled the fifth over 100 times. It's just ridiculous. Then they asked him one particular question. They said that you've spoken to the media about this, but you won't speak to the committee about this. And the way it was phrased was that you've answered these same questions in the media, but you won't answer the same questions here. And the problem I had with that is just show the media footage at this time then. Instead of talking about he pled the fifth and this and that, say he pled the fifth, and then proceed to show the media footage. And how I would have done this if I was the committee is I would have said, this is the question we asked him. This was his response in the closed hearing. Show him pleading the fifth. And then I would have said, this was his response when the same question was posed to him on network X, Y, and Z. That's how I would have did that. So either there's footage of him providing this information in the media or there's not. I want to know. That was confusing to me, and I had a problem with how that was presented. If there's footage, okay, he didn't answer in the hearing, but y'all have been showing news footage and videos of everything else. Just show that too. And why not? Is it or is it ain't? Is it there or is it ain't there? I want to know. So then there was a case, Eastman v. Thompson. And the judge said this was a coup in search of a legal theory. It just went downhill from there. So then they come back to Lutic. Lutic is the old conservative. And again, I'm not saying that to diminish him in any way by age. I'm saying that to highlight the fact that he's been a conservative a long time and has been well respected. I'm sure he has. So Ludwig then says, Aguilar yields, but then he gets back his time. Um, I know. Did I skip Ludic? No. Okay, I didn't. They take some time. They come back. Okay. So, Aguilar yields, but then he has to get back his time for closing, and then he has a closing remark. Liz Cheney gives her closing remark, and one of the things I highlighted from her was that Mike Pence was a man who loved his country more than, or no, she said that Donald Trump was supposed to love his country more than himself. And if he had loved his country more than himself, he would have conceded. And I pointed out here, and a lot of people may not remember, Jeff Sessions, Trump's original attorney general, was the first one to stand up to him. And I'm going to depart here to bring this up, because this was before I embarked on this little blog journey that I have. So, I see what happened. I think I skipped the page. Anyways, Jeff Sessions was the first one to stand up to him. And Jeff Sessions got bullied out of his position. What happened was, this wasn't the first impeachment trial, I don't think. I think it was, there was an investigation into the then 2016 election, and they were looking to see if there was foreign, particularly Russian, interference into the election. And Jeff Sessions passed it off to another counsel to oversee it. Donald Trump, I remember this very clearly, Donald Trump in his ignorance got mad because he thought Jeff Sessions was supposed to represent him. First of all, the AG is not your personal attorney. That's the first thing. And somebody should have checked him then. But again, I'm still not understanding why people didn't check him. It's not your personal attorney. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, as an attorney, we have certain ethics rules that govern us no matter what. No matter if we're working for the president, no matter if we're working for whoever we're working for, we have to go by our ethics rules. And there's a particular ethics rule that I'm sure is probably common among all jurisdictions, is that you're not supposed to represent somebody in a trial when you could potentially be called as a witness. Now, sometimes it happens that you're representing someone you didn't think that you would have been in a position to get called as a witness, and then something comes up and, hey, we found this and this implicates you as a witness. The court deals with that then. You might have to step down, or they deal with that then. But if you know ahead of time that you could be potentially called as a witness in a trial, you're not supposed to represent anybody's interest in that trial. And to be honest with you, at that point, you as an attorney probably need to get an attorney, just a CYA. So Jeff Sessions repeated, he said, as an attorney bound by my ethics rules, I am not allowed to represent someone or an entity at that point, whether it be Donald Trump or the government or the administration. I'm not allowed to represent somebody when I know I might be called as a witness. Why did he think he would have been called as a witness? There was a time where Jeff Sessions worked on the campaign. I think he was one of the first supporters of President Trump, and he campaigned for him. So if he was a part of the campaign and we're investigating campaign things, yeah, he could have been called as a witness, and he told him no. So from then on, President Trump threw a fit, and instead of just firing the man, he basically would go do interviews and call him all types of everything but a child of God. And Jeff Sessions eventually resigned. Jeff Sessions is old, but that was the first person that kind of really stood up to him and tried to tell him something wasn't right. And the problem is, everybody knew that Jeff Sessions was right in that matter, but nobody wanted to stand with him. Nobody wanted to be courageous. Nobody wanted to say anything. I just don't understand that. I would have told him this. I just don't understand that. And I know people say, well, you can't say what you would have done in that situation. Maybe in my 20s, I can't say what I would have done in that situation. But as somebody who is a professional in my own right, I'm not getting in mess for nobody. I'm not. So at the very least, I would have been out. At the very least, I wouldn't have stayed there and let you do it. And I get a lot of the staffers say, well, we stayed because, the alternative, if some other people had came in, I get that too, but there are more of you guys than there are of him. And at some point, it should have been a no. We're not. Go sit down. I don't care how much money you have. Put your pants on one leg at a time like I do. It's ridiculous. And then I'm starting to wonder if you do that, because this was some childish stuff. This was as serious as this was. At the heart of this was a big old tantrum. It was really ridiculous. So, before they adjourn, and I can't remember who asked him the question or what, but they come back to Lutic. And I have in my notes that he was a retired federal judge. So when I said that earlier, I was on point. Lutic wrote that this was a continued threat. Trump posed a continued threat, and he would do it again if he didn't win in the next election. So they asked him kind of what did he mean by that, and he said this is not something that he says lightly, and this is not something that he would have said before. He said, but his issue in his mind is that Trump, his allies, and his supporters, they are still a clear and present danger to democracy. This is what Lutic said. He says, not because of January 6th. He said, it's because to this day, they pledged that they would do the same thing in 2024. And he keeps repeating. He says he does not say that lightly. But he says this has been told by him firsthand by former allies of the president and supporters of the president, that they do the same thing again. And he says that they are executing this pre-2024 plan in plain view. Nobody's stopping them. He said it's candidly, and they're proud of it. Then the January 6th committee, they give a, they provide a link that I'm going to put in the description. I say that, and I probably forget to do it all the time, but I'm going to do it this time. January 6th, house.gov, and you can view evidence from the public hearing. And there's also a tip line. They said they want any information, big or small. And that was the end of day 3. I know I said I would do day 3 and 4, but because this video got to over an hour, I'm going to go ahead and end here on day 3, and then I'm going to record the day 4 video separately, just so they're not so long. But the great news is you don't have to sort out timestamps or anything for it. So, guys, visit www.inreblawg.com. I will be writing more things soon. Please stay informed. Stay on top of these hearings when you get the chance, and just, I don't know, stay informed.